through their front gates. The second group seems to be moving a little bit faster than that first one, which is calmly staying in order. Second one has a little bit of a pep to their step because it looks like there's something on their heels. Now it's up to these infantrymen, of course, to defend this location. And there, of course, is a cannon firing on the far side. That was the 6-pounder. You can certainly hear the difference in the sound and the quality of that. A very deep rumble indeed. And now the Americans are setting up what appears to be some sort of skirmish line in front of the gates. The American commander is coming in as well, and he's marshalling off his men. You see them off to, of course, the one area setting up a flank. Some of the militia, American militia, of course, are actually at those ports, those musket ports in the palisade wall, firing out at what appears to be, of course, British regulars and militia beyond them. And here come the regular American troops, of course, are marching in. The American Army is now taking its position, and those first smaller companies, of course, are standing, waiting, ready for that attack when it comes through. And as you can see now, they're really moving quickly, trying to get into position to force this issue. Should the British try to force through that gate, you want to watch that very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, because that's where the action is going to be happening. And then we see another American militia unit there coming in their forested greens, and they are taking the extreme left flank. And you can see as the commander on the American side has now set up his defensive perimeter. He has come in from that fight, and there still seem to be firing away outside, so that means there could be more troops there as well. And we shortly should see what happens if they try to force those gates. They're going to be in for a bit of a surprise with that amount of musketry aimed at that one small area. And of course that would funnel any of the large numbers of men that are coming from the outside. You can hear that musketry rolling now, ladies and gentlemen, as volley after volley is being fired. Obviously a good deal of fighting going on beyond the palisade wall. And you can see, of course, those militiamen now standing up, and they're firing through those musket ports, well protected behind the palisade. Notice how they do that, standing in line. Men in line are loading their muskets so that they run up, fire quickly, turn around, and the next person then takes their spot, running up to the hole and firing as well, trying to create a consistent rate of fire, which must be very disconcerting for the British troops on the other side, of course, because they're probably getting hit in the flank, which means from the side, while they're desperately trying to fight, of course, against the American group directly in front of them. Unbeknownst to them, of course, they don't know what they're going to face once they get in through those gates, should they try to charge them. And this is, of course, the great mystery they must solve as they attack Fort George. They're going to have to really summon up a good deal of bravery. And if you can think about that, being a soldier at this time, having to come through those gates, not knowing what you're going to be facing, not realizing how they've lined up their men, and how, of course, all those muskets are pointed directly in the direction of that gate. Another artillery shell sent off, and there it is, another hit on Campbell's Bastion, ladies and gentlemen, as the smoke pours forward off the edge of it. Now the battle is definitely heating up. You can see that smoke just wafting across there. And had there been no breeze today, and thank goodness there was because of the humidity, but if it had been absolutely still, this battlefield would very, very quickly get cloudier and cloudier, until some instances, with enough artillery smoke, you could not see more than 5 or 6 feet in front of you, which made it very difficult. Here come the British. The British should look like they're pushing through, and there's the volley from the American line, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke now clears, and there are still British soldiers coming through. The American commander is now moving his troops, and as is the British commander, they're forming up. And now we see linear fire taking place, ladies and gentlemen, as they start to force into lines to try to decide this. This is very definitely a situation where it's raw courage to stand there and wait for your turn to fire your volley of musketry, while the other side, of course, is lining up as opposite you to fire as well. And there we see more British troops are pouring through that gate now, ladies and gentlemen. The American commander is about to have his hands very full. He's got both of the flanks covered, of course, by militia on the left flank. Oh, and another artillery firing, ladies and gentlemen, which could be deadly, taking down people left and right. There are the British colours you can see through the smoke. There's the Union flag proudly flying in the breeze there, ladies and gentlemen. And now, of course, the firing is heating up definitely. Both flanks firing at the same time. as well as the soldiers, of course, in the middle firing. And the British are returning, volley for volley. Now you can see the American commander is moving his troops farther back to get them out of the direct line of fire. And you can see that what they're doing is creating some sort of a strategic maneuver that allows them to drop back while covering, of course, the men that are dropping back. And then when the next line drops back, that line is in place to cover their movement. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, we do have American troops up in the barracks as well. They've seen that, of course, that the gate has been breached. And as I mentioned to you a little earlier, these became defensive outposts themselves. And those long slits in the wall up there on the barracks, those are musket ports. And right now we're seeing musketry coming out of there. You see that, ladies and gentlemen, the smoke pouring out of the barracks. And now the British really are going to have their hands full as they face that American line, as well as the American musketry that is coming out of the upper floors of the barracks. A very difficult thing to have to deal with. Oh, and I see a couple of the British soldiers down, ladies and gentlemen. I see 2 down on the battlefield there. And more musketry is pouring out of the barracks on my right-hand side. And there are the colors. They're aligning the British lines. According to tradition, there's that linear tactic coming into place. 2 lines of soldiers. Of course, that front will fire, and then, of course, they can wait, and the back will fire through them as well. And that's exactly what they're employing. They're trying to create a steady rate of musketry. Meanwhile, of course, the British are taking a few hits on the side because they're being flanked on the side. The Americans on the right flank are now dropping back. They're moving across the battlefield to probably get more in line with their other compatriots because that left flank has already moved back. And the British are moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, under a hail of musket balls. And of course, the British can be very, very confident about this sort of maneuver. They like to get very close. And more artillery. There we see in Brock's Bastion, ladies and gentlemen, a direct hit, and the smoke pouring out of the bastion as that cannonball comes in. And look at the smoke as it pours across the battlefield, making it very difficult to see. And I see right in the middle of the action, there is the Indian Department, ladies and gentlemen. Those fine fellows, of course, that work very closely with the native allies of the British, who are also out front fighting as well. And they've taken to the center a very dangerous position indeed, but they do have the flexibility of being able to maneuver, to get up and to run about if they choose to do so, to get into a better position. Now I'm hearing the fifes and drums of the British Army coming through as well, ladies and gentlemen. Fifes and drums, of course, are never out front. They're usually young men, and they would never put them directly into harm's way. And there's another volley from the barracks as the British are trying to extend their line out to force that American line to get thinner and thinner. Obviously overwhelmed by the numbers that they're getting put at. The American commander is trying to keep this line as far spread as possible so he does not get flanked. So we're taken by surprise from the corner. He still has his 2 flanking companies out there. And now a very concerted round of volleying in. Here comes some American militia, are now moving into position. They're the ones, of course, that you see with the top hats on and their shirt sleeves. May possibly even be what they call Canadian volunteers. Those people that lived here in this province and decided that they wanted to welcome the new occupants of this fort, the American Army, and decided to join and help out. And these Canadian volunteers, of course, are standing up against the British line as they see it. And now the British are forming their central line, ladies and gentlemen. You notice there are a few commanders out there. Very difficult in the din of battle to get those commands back and forth. Sometimes it was used by the fife and drummers to relay messages, but in this instance we actually see practically a commander for each one of the wings of this army as it starts to spread out. And the powder smoke is getting thicker and thicker. And I see someone down on the American line. Yes, he's struggling to get out of the line, a very important thing to do. You can imagine, if this army progresses forward, you do not want to be injured on the battlefield and be in the way of hostile troops. Another British soldier has gone down as well. Think of all the lead going through the air, ladies and gentlemen, going across that battlefield like a scythe, slamming into the men across the way. Another cannon retort, this one from the British side going back to the American lines. There, another volley again. You can see the limitations of these weapons, ladies and gentlemen. It takes time to reload them in between volleys. And you can imagine being a soldier on that battlefield, desperately trying to get your musket loaded. Because all the time that you're taking to do so, someone is firing at you across the way and you cannot return that fire. I really think the British are going to have their hands full with these barracks over here, ladies and gentlemen. That fire coming down from above with musketry. You can see that American soldier who's injured in the middle, that poor gentleman there, still desperately trying to get off the battlefield and out of the way. I see a number of other American soldiers, of course, who have fallen to the volleys of the British, and another direct shot into Brock's bastion. That black smoke pours through those bastion holes there where the cannon are. And you can see how cloudy now this battlefield has gotten. On the occasion of the Battle of Lundy's Lane, ladies and gentlemen, that powder smoke got so thick, it would be about this time as well that it was undertaken, that in very short order there was many instances of men shooting men on their own side because they couldn't see those men through that cloud of smoke. Particularly with the British rifle companies wearing dark green rather than the traditional red, out skirmishing with the American lines, and when they drop back to their own lines, of course, the red coats in line didn't see red coats coming towards them, thought they were the enemy and shot them. So you would hope, of course, that that wouldn't happen to you. You can see, oh, someone's hat's just shot right off there. That was a lucky shot indeed. It's always good when your hat goes off and your head's still not in it. All right. Now you see what's happening on the flanks, if you can, ladies and gentlemen, over here. They're spread out, they are skirmishing, they don't have those direct lines that you're seeing in the middle, but the fire is just as fierce. I'm certainly seeing the Indian Department fighting out there. And what looks to be like provincial dragoons as well, busy, of course, off their horses now, or they could be actually Royal Artillery. I'm not too certain from this distance if I can tell, but they've taken, of course, the firing as well. And in the center of that line, I'm seeing a couple of people in forage coats. When it's time for battle, you muster everyone you possibly can, ladies and gentlemen. Now the British can lay down a volley. Ooh, that was a good one. And the Americans are still attempting to create a strategic retreat maneuver across this battlefield. And more artillery comes into play. It won't be long, ladies and gentlemen, before this battle is going to be going right by you. So get your cameras ready if you've been taking long shots. It's going to be happening right in front of you. You can see in this one U.S. unit right here, of course, there's a young drummer still making the beat behind, and they lay down a volley. And you notice as well sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, some of these muskets don't fire. They were incredibly unreliable. 30% at any time would not be firing. So once again, if you're a soldier on this field and look at the ones falling around you, you don't want to be fooling around with your musket trying to clean it out to make sure that it actually unleashes with a little bit of fire later on. And here we go. There are some more of the militia going across there, ladies and gentlemen. Moving out in a very interesting maneuver. They've left their left flank rather exposed so that they can support their right flank for some particular purpose. And it looks like they're really anchoring themselves on that last barracks. Indeed, they're trying to mass as many men there as possible so they can lay down as strong a fire to what obviously they perceive as the British center. And the British center is on the move. You can see them marching into position. They are really going to be forcing this issue today, ladies and gentlemen. And there's that American left flank. Now down to about 4 men, having lost one of their numbers. Still under heavy fire, of course. And once again, the Americans are still maneuvering, trying to find the best spot that they can make their stand and make the British pay dearly should they wish to retake their fort. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, at this particular time in history, of course, the British Army was probably one of the finest fighting armies in the entire Western world. Their relentless adherence to drill and drilling their men over and over and over again meant that when they got on the battlefield like this, the men did not think. They were probably infinitely more frightened by their sergeants and officers than they were by the enemy, but they were conditioned to respond to commands. And when the command was given, they marched forward. And they didn't think about what necessarily they were doing, so they didn't have time to be frightened. And this is what made them such a tremendous fighting force at that time. Of course, the American Army does catch up with the soldiers by that 1814 year through their own relentless drilling. And you start to see the skill level between the two armies start to even out considerably. And now you see the American commander, he's walking behind his lines now, trying to figure out his strategy, looking for the weak spots that he might be able to exploit within the British lines, but they're looking pretty solid. They're looking very solid indeed. And there comes a quick round there, I believe, from the, here's maybe the 104th down there. I can't see the smoke. And you'll notice, of course, some of the gallant native warriors that were the allies, of course, of the British in this area, the Mohawk and other Iroquois tribes, of course, fighting alongside the British Indian Department. And now you can see how far they pull back, and now the body count is starting to climb, ladies and gentlemen. You can only fire so many times in this fashion before it starts to take out manpower, and that's what's happening. That left company here of the U.S. Army has really been taking it hard. I think they may have lost as many as 5 or 6 men out of that small company, and that's taken them down to 5 that are still standing, and one, of course, is the drummer. So that's only 4 active combatives right there, and they're facing off against a considerably larger British force who is now starting to push that left flank. You can see, look, they're moving up there. I don't think the American Army has any choice but to try and regroup, try and maintain the integrity. Oh, and another one goes down, ladies and gentlemen, right in front of you. As that left flank is exploited by that British volley. Now, just 3 volunteers there who are desperately trying to hold off what could be a very strong attack from what appears to be, I believe, the 41st Regiment there on that left flank, ladies and gentlemen, who laid down that well-executed volley. There it goes again, and of course now the battlefield is starting to be crowded with those wounded. In that instance, it was quite common. Sometimes you would see the fifers and drummers, when they stopped playing, to dash forward and drag out some of the wounded from their own side to get them out of harm's way. Sometimes a man in line might sling his musket if he was your friend and drag you out of the way. But it was very important to get off this battlefield. The longer you stayed on that battlefield, the greater the chance you're going to be re-injured. Many men who were injured once, if they didn't get off the battlefield, would show up at the field hospital later with 3 or 4 other injuries that had been inflicted on them simply because they were in harm's way. And as you can see, there's still some movement amongst those men that are down there. So if the other armies marching across choose to, and that was quite common, being bayoneted while you were laying there was quite a common thing to have happen, and a terrible thing indeed. Now I see some of the British line are dropping down. Yes, indeed, we have one down on the ground there right in front of that right flank, and here comes this left flank now, ladies and gentlemen. And they are definitely on the move. They have really forced this issue, and now you're seeing, of course, this left flank fall back. I think the issue is starting to be pressed quite severely, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, a few of our gray-clad U.S. soldiers are now taking cover behind this picket fence in front of the officers' quarters, hoping that that small amount of wood in front of them is going to protect them from what can just best be described as the onslaught of this British juggernaut as it moves across this battlefield. Another volley on the left-hand side here. Oh, and they're firing an echelon, ladies and gentlemen. That means one small group after another small group after another small group, laying down a decimating amount of lead. And now you can hear the native warriors are showing up on that right flank. My goodness gracious, that volley took out a whole huge amount of this left flank, ladies and gentlemen. Evening things out just a little bit, but still overwhelming odds on the behalf of the British, even though they lost maybe 5 or 6 men in that single volley of well-placed, which happens when you get closer and closer. The musket becomes far more accurate weapon. And there they go, they're trying to get out of harm's way, trying to shore up that central line, ladies and gentlemen. And it looks like the British are going up into the barracks to try to flush out those American shooters with muskets through that musket port. You can still see the smoke coming out occasionally. There's one that's been taken down. They can't seem to get into the barracks, but they're going to have to get rid of those shooters, or they're going to be plaguing them for the rest of this battle. They don't want to get past the barracks and still have men firing through those musket ports at them, because that's a good way to get shot in the back once you've secured this position. And now watch the well-oiled machine that is known as the British Army start to move its way across that battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. And another large artillery shell hitting off of Brock's Bastion, the smoke starting to curl up into the air. With the proximity of this battle, ladies and gentlemen, I think you can feel the sense of confusion, certainly of desperation, that might befall, of course, this much smaller American force now, which is practically, from the look of the body count, cut in half from what it started. But they're still keeping the British in a bit of a pickle over there on the right